Hello, everyone. This is the first of several housing podcasts that the AIA Santa Barbara chapter is putting together. The visitors we have today from the right side of your screen are Michael Holliday. We've got Doss Williams, myself, Ellen Bildsten, and Mack Carlson. We'll each introduce ourselves and then launch into the conversation. So take it away, Michael.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellen. My name is Michael Holliday, local architect here in Santa Barbara for about 36 years now, and we are involved in quite a few downtown housing projects. Our firm is DMHA, and honored to be part of the panel and to open up the discussion and hopefully, be able to answer a few questions and probably ask a lot more than as we look into the future. A lot of really exciting legislation has come down in the state of California recently, and that's what we'll be talking about today.
Great. On to you, Doss.
Doss Williams. I'm a former state legislator and former county supervisor. Just live in Carpinteria with my two little girls. I have a wonderful wife, but have lived all over the area for most of my life. Santa Barbara, Isla Vista, Colita, and love it.
I'm Ellen Bildsten, architect, Bildsten Architecture Planning. We're a housing-oriented firm working on a number of projects in and around town. Live in the county of Santa Barbara, raised our family here in Santa Barbara, own our home, own our business building downtown, the business as well. So just a lot of different levels of engagement. Very focused on housing and advocacy through both the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, as well as CHC, the Coastal Housing Coalition. That's how I got to know Mac as on him.
My name is Mack Carlson. I'm a land use, water, and natural resources attorney with Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck here in Santa Barbara. Most of my practice has been focused lately on housing issues. I was also born and raised in Santa Barbara and feel very fortunate to be able to have made it back here for my career. Lastly, as the token attorney on this panel, I have to state that the views expressed are my own and not any of my clients. Thank you.
Mhm. With that, we'll get the conversation rolling. Michael, I was listening to some comments you made recently about the economic forecast event that we had here in town and what some of the takeaways were that you had, and how did we get here where we are in the housing space?
Yeah, I think it's kind of real important that we're as a group we kind of keep ourselves informed, and I'm on the board with the UCSB Economic Forecast Project, which is part of what UCSB does, but they're looking at the economics of all kinds of issues. And this year was one of the focuses was on housing. We had Lee Ohanian, who's a distinguished fellow, professor of economics from UCLA. He's also a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution from Stanford, and he came and presented kind of a really interesting historical perspective on housing and how we got here. And so that's really what I wanted. I learned a lot from that presentation, and we can also put the link online for anyone that's interested in reviewing the entire several-hour event. One of the things that was really quite interesting, he talked about this California specifically and what the history of California going back to the 1940s was, and how the growth that happened in this state and during the 40s and the 50s and 60s into early 70s. And there's a tremendous amount of growth in this state. There's also a tremendous amount of home that were built. And it was interesting to note that the average price of a home in California averaged about 4 times the average national or average state income for people. So if you wanted to buy a house, it was usually valued at about 4 times what your annual salary was. And then right around 1970, for a lot of reasons we'll talk about today, that changed. And so today it is about 16 times the average salary is what a home costs in California on average, and more in some areas and less in other areas. And what drove that up a lot of ways was the California Environmental Quality Act that happened in 1970. Well-intentioned, and a lot of really good environmental aspects came out of that are still valid today. but there's been a lot of unintended consequences and some misuse to prevent, or slow growth, and in some cases eliminate growth. So, one of the examples that was presented at the seminar was Newhall Ranch, which was a proposal for 60,000 of 60,000 person community. It was submitted in 1994 near Valencia, south of us, and the first homes were not built until 2021. So it took 27 years to get through they basically, it was a series of environmental lawsuits that they dealt with. And what happened was the cost of these homes, which were initially intended to be for working class people, ended up being as much as $2.8 million for a home. So the net cost of trying to slow things down just drove up the sales price, which was sort of endemic, and that's what we'll see here in California. So right now, in 2025, the California median home price is 884,000, and the U.S. median price is 410,000. So it just gives you a sense for how is California doing, in relation to the rest of the country. About double. And 16% of California households can afford a home based on these numbers, and about 50% of the U.S. households can afford a home in the U.S. So it just goes to show you how we got here and what the economics are. Last couple statistics, which were really interesting. The average home price in Santa Barbara is 1.4 million. So you take that 884, it's almost double to live in this community. So the affordability gap it goes from 16% down to like 8 to 12% to be able to afford a home. So clearly people cannot afford homes in our community, and we haven't really done a good job. There's been about 100 new housing laws passed in the last few years, but building permits have declined. So despite a lot of these well-intended measures, it hasn't reduced the cost of housing. And that's really what he said is the problem, that and some of the recent bills that we're going to talk about today actually are solving that problem because we're increasing density on existing land. But until you get the cost significantly lower, we're not going to really be solving the problem. So anyway, that was just some sort of general input as to how we got to where we are, starting from the 1940s up to the 1970s, and then with the California Environmental Quality Act being implemented in 1970, what's kind of happened, and here we are in 2025, sort of looking back, like how can we fix the problems that we've created, and move forward to create more housing for our community.
Right. So that fixing that you're referring to, Michael, I think, has been understood by the state of California as to what can we do with with laws and approaches to getting housing done to address that deficit of housing that we've been experiencing over the few decades that you were mentioning to us. Mac, I think you know an awful lot about these state laws that have recently come into effect. What are some of them that particularly rise to your mind in terms of having an impact on addressing that deficit of housing that we're experiencing?
Thanks, Ellen. A bunch of thoughts here. I'll try to start at a fairly high level. I would put the state legislator um, approach to housing laws into a couple different camps. There is a prioritization for better planning, and you'll see that with stricter laws surrounding the regional housing needs assessment process or local housing element requirements. And I think Santa Barbara County, everyone should be familiar now with the Santa Barbara County housing element process that went forward over the last few years. There's also been a variety of state laws focused on streamlining and reducing barriers to new housing development. So those are laws like the Housing Accountability Act, State Density Bonus Law, amendments to the Permit Streamlining Act that are designed to reduce the amount of local review over specific housing projects. Those two laws, I think, work together. The state has been encouraging local agencies to push their planning process forward, push their design process forward through clear documents like a general plan, zoning code, and design standards, and then trying to make sure that when a specific project comes in underneath those overarching plans, there's an expedited and clear process for review. The other piece of legislation or bills that the legislator passes that I think get a lot of attention, but we haven't seen as much here locally at least, are specific types of streamlined development for projects. So you might have heard of these as like Senate Bill 35 or Senate Bill 423 or Assembly Bill 2011 or Senate Bill 6, where these come out as high-profile bills that are designed to like convert commercial sites into residential projects, but they come with a laundry list of criteria that are very hard to qualify for, especially here on the Central Coast. So, those get a lot of attention, but they're not always as effective in being implemented as some of these overarching policy changes that are requiring local agencies to, one, plan for more housing and push the planning process forward into the design or the planning phase instead of the project phase, and then protections for individual projects once they move forward under those improved plans.
Hmm. So, Das, you're working in this realm as well, and of the laws that Mack was just speaking about, streamlining the Housing Accountability Act. How do you see those playing into the ethical way of moving forward and creating more housing in our community?
I think some of them will be effective, but I think it's useful to take a step back and go into what happened in people's thoughts, processes, and people's hearts that got us here, and what kind of ethical realization, transformation needs to take place to get us out. Because it would be one thing to try to produce housing over the wishes of local people. It would be a whole nother thing to try to produce housing with local people understanding the need. Right? And so I think where we got from is a generation of folks in the 70s, I think understandably questioned sort of the imperative of growth, progress, maybe would be that term used at the time. And I think it's well placed because it happened at the same time of environmental the growth of environmental awareness and the growth of the environmental movement. However, sometime in the next 20 years, we should have realized by data, by looking around us, that not building any housing was destroying both our next generation's opportunity, but also the environment. My employer now is the alternative energy provider for most of the 5 counties, Central Coast Community Energy. Our charter is decarbonization. It's very hard to decarbonize a community the more automobile dependent that they are. And the real result, I think, of no growth has not been that we have less traffic. It's not been that we preserved our communities. It's been that the communities become highways, communities that are much bigger during the day than at night, and where we waste all our workers' time and destroy the environment by making them drive incessantly. And that we have to realize that pattern is not consistent with our environmental ethics as a community, right? That now driving 60% of carbon emissions will stop us from being able to make a meaningful contribution to fighting climate change. And it will also ruin the lives of your children and grandchildren, right? And prevent the generational continuity that every community that likes to think of itself as a community strives to have, right? And so to me, the real imperative is that of ethical evolution, not to take any kind of growth or any kind of housing production, but to really think about it, to say there is an imperative beyond just providing housing for low-income individuals. There is an imperative to providing housing for a whole nother generation of people in this community. And I think in conjunction with those laws, a community that comes to that realization will be much more effective at producing the housing. I think the last string of housing elements were a good sign in this. For the first time ever, the county, and I'm honored to have been a part of it, even though it didn't necessarily add to my popularity. I'm really glad that to be part of the first time a housing element in the county of Santa Barbara, stress production close to jobs, right? Close to the places where we could effectively decarbonize the community, increase quality of life, make it a more livable community. And I see that both the city of Goleta and the city of Santa Barbara strove to do that as well.
Right. So, Michael, in the housing projects that your firm is working on, just picking up from what Doss is saying, what are you seeing as the intersections of housing and transportation and the way that those work together to support one another? Are you seeing any of those sorts of impacts in projects you're working on?
Yeah, I think what Doss was alluding to is creating the sense of community that people feel connected to the place that they live, that they can live in, they can work, and they can raise their family, and they're not commuting a half an hour or 45 minutes or even an hour in some cases, living in one place and working in another place. So I love the idea that we're talking about that, and that's really the desire to create housing where people live and work and raise their families, and you're creating a sense of community. It is related to transportation, and we're hopeful that Santa Barbara doesn't go down as one of the communities with the greatest amount of vision and the least amount of implementation, because we've got literally 100 years of drawings, and they're up on the wall, and it's 3 to 4, in some cases 5 levels of residential above ground floor commercial. It looks beautiful. The drawings are on the wall. It is the image of Santa Barbara that we all try to sort of grab a hold of. And
The Gebhard room, right? At the city.
yeah, they're on the
630
city, and
Garden.
this was part of the results of the 1925 earthquake. And part of what we're celebrating with EQ25 is 100 years of vision that sort of created this beautiful community that we all live in. But we haven't implemented much of that. And if we can build the housing where the people are, which is in the downtown cores, not in the, we're not expanding the urban boundary, we're not building out in the middle of sort of rural areas, but if we can build the housing in the places that people would use it, then that's directly related to and adjacent to the major transportation hubs. You don't need, I was in Copenhagen and ended up spending, 2 weeks living on the 4th and 5th floor of a suite with no elevator, by the way. So I understand why those people are in really good shape. The Danish people, you're up and down the elevator. But all we did was we ate at the little cafes. We got our clothes cleaned at the restaurant. We had breakfast over there, lunch over there. We just stayed right there. We rode bikes everywhere else. So you really don't need cars if you can build in that kind of community. And by the way, it was beautiful. It wasn't a canyonization of any community. It was just a beautiful place to live. So I think the models are out there. The drawings are up on the wall. We just need to make it happen. And that's what we're really here to do. And I think some of these state policies are going to help us get there. We've got some obstacles, but that's really what we're seeing, at least on the projects that we're involved with, and the ones on the board, trying to make sense of them. Because if the economics don't work, and some of the developers that we're working with are telling us if the economics don't work, there is no project.
Right.
So you can have beautiful drawings, but if they don't pencil financially, it will never be built. And so we got to make it work financially, or else there won't be new housing created.
Well, sorry, as an outsider, I've been monitoring the EQ25 pictures that everyone has posted on the organization's website and the AIA, and I was kind of stunned to see how many taller buildings on State Street there were before 1925 than there are today. You can walk through on some of those picture comparisons, and you see 4-story buildings on State Street. You can see buildings like the Granada that don't exist today and have been replaced with 1-story buildings. So I know we talked, you started us off with this history of the 40s to now, but really we've seen a decrease in the amount of height and density and concentration of our community since 1925, when we went and rebuilt after. I mean, Santa Barbara is a beautiful place to live because of that rebuild effort, but it's stark to me that we're having so many conversations about whether 4 stories is appropriate for our town when you can see pictures from 1925 on State Street where we had 4 stories.
Mack, I just also wanted to kind of carry forward on Michael's comments about like a mixed use approach to a downtown area like he experienced in his trip, where maybe you have shops on the ground floor and a couple floors of housing up above. Are you seeing state laws that are encouraging that type of development or getting more creative in our zoning use of properties where we're trying to bring different things together and making the need for transportation and driving around, as Doss was talking about, that much less important?
Yes, I think from the state law side, there's a couple different priorities and options. I think state law looks at commercially zoned properties that are sort of, historically cities have picked commercial areas, industrial areas, and residential areas, and then distinguish between multifamily and single family. And so in areas now that are sort of commercial areas, and commercial real estate has kind of been on the decline just across the US, even before COVID and especially after COVID, the legislator has looked at those commercial sites as an opportunity for these types of larger scale streamlining laws that would allow developers to come in and do mixed use projects or completely residential projects within commercial zones that meet certain criteria. And so that might be a great option here to require and include residential in downtown areas. The other piece of things that the state has kind of stepped in and said to some of Das's points earlier is that they're trying to reduce or drive down the amount of required parking, because parking is actually very expensive for a project, and it replaces square footage that can be used for something else. So bills like Assembly Bill 2097 reduce or eliminate parking requirements within a certain distance of a major transit stop. And here in Santa Barbara, we're fortunate to have quite a few major transit stops. So that's another angle that I think we will see probably more projects with less parking, which maybe encourages types of alternative transportation use and also helps concentrate development in our downtown core.
Right. Are there more than two transit hubs currently, or is it the train station and the transit center
The
at
trans
Chapala? I think are those.
There are also so there's been actually a bill last year that increase the amount of frequency, so it increased the time. So if you're near a major transit stop, which can be a bus stop with that intersects 2 or more routes with 20 minutes service interval or less, in peak AM and PM hours, you can qualify as a major transit stop and reduce or eliminate your parking. Now, an applicant can always choose to provide more parking, and often people do, right? These projects, I think it's scary to say it's all parking is eliminated. But for most projects, they want to still provide some parking. It's just letting the free market establish what amount of parking versus what amount of commercial and residential space on the site.
Right, which I think gets back to something Michael was talking about, just of, if we have flexibility, we can look at things that what is the market asking for? Is it asking for people to have on-site parking, or is that less of a priority based on who we're trying to accommodate with the way we build things? Yeah. Das, you talked earlier about understanding the need, and I just wanted to come back to that. Just talk a little bit more about what you're seeing as the need for housing, and the extent to which you see us satisfying that in the current climate or not.
Yeah, I think in a lot of neighborhoods here in Santa Barbara, we're seeing a unfolding of a heartbreak. In my own in Carpinteria, this happens. This has happened a lot on the east side and west side, where you see that the housing values are so exceeding the ability of working class or middle class people that even when folks are able to persist in their neighborhood by renting because they can't own, that owners are deciding to, you know, do a remodel, sell to someone who makes a whole lot more money, and we just lose renters. We lose especially young people and Latinos, and we are losing people also from our school system at the same time. In Carpinteria, are having a hard time even having enough kids to have a football team. That we have one school, the more working class school, that is contracting
dramatically in the number of students. And it's not that there aren't people who want to, that work in Carpinteria and Santa Barbara who want to live there. It's that they're working there and then price gets exiled. They lose their rental spot. And then there's nothing else for them to get. And so when people talk about they want, and this is, I think, important because I think people here have come to the realization that they want affordable housing. But when politicians say affordable, it's really important for the public to know that's only for low income people. And so if people of the, that's right. If people want affordable housing for working class people, middle class people, then that means that they either need to have some market component or some other category of affordable housing that is out there. And because 100% affordable housing by itself is not going to answer that need of the middle and working class.
Yeah. So, Mac, in your understanding of like how the legislation from the state is impacting us, do you see a movement towards an understanding about workforce housing? To speak to Doss's point, um, addressing affordability other than saying you have to have this many affordable units. Are there actionable laws that you're seeing that actually assist in making things affordable, either by design or by density or other ways to achieve it?
Sure. I think there's been progress. I don't think it has trickled down into local communities yet. The legislator has been focused on a handful, I think, of bills that are trying to create sort of affordable by design type development. I think some of that has been, the most successful of those would be accessory dwelling unit laws, right? That are designed to create small 1 or 2 units in your backyard to host a child or, an elderly person that you're giving care to, or rent for additional money. For example, I live in an accessory dwelling unit, but I purchased my house, I rent the house out, and I live in the ADU. So that creates an opportunity for someone to purchase a home or rent in this market that would not otherwise be able to. Another law like that would be Senate Bill 9. This was often referred to as the duplex bill. That has not really taken off in city of Santa Barbara as much, or in the county as much. But it's intended to kind of create an avenue to create duplexes and smaller lots. There was also a recent package of bills, Senate Bill 684, and then some follow-on legislation that is targeting small-scale subdivisions within single-family neighborhoods and existing multifamily neighborhoods to create sort of condos or townhouse-style development, so that people who have undeveloped lots can subdivide those lots and create affordable by design homes. We've also seen density bonus law be amended to kind of create additional density bonuses for projects that involve more moderate income units. Just from my perspective, almost every project I've worked on in my entire career as a land use attorney involves some capital A affordable requirement, because of the benefits it provides for state law to streamline the project and to add additional density to make the project pencil. But that's not enough to address our supply debt, right? As Michael alluded to earlier, and I've heard this number come up, I think, in a podcast with Senator Wiener and Assemblymember Wicks, that we're about 3 million homes behind in California as of today, right? So we have a big deficit, and so it's important to remember that it's going to take time to dig ourselves out of this hole.
Yeah. Michael, are you seeing things like ADUs, as Mac was mentioning? Is that a component of the type of work that your firm is doing? And how are you seeing them used by the
Well, there's
people
some
who
recent
are?
legislation that actually was just came through here in June of 2025 with this Assembly Bill 1033, which allows homeowners to sell their accessory dwelling units separately from the primary residence. I mean, that's sort of a genius idea because it's allowing, just think about it. If you could take your single family home and cut it up into 2 or 3 little things, you're being more efficient for the cost of the land. So that's one of the things that's sort of a game changer. You couldn't even do this before till this new legislation came down. So it hasn't really filtered its way. I think ADUs have been around for the last several years, but this is sort of some game-changing legislation that actually addresses the economic side of the formula. And the only other thing I was going to comment on with what Mac was mentioning, we need all kinds of housing, not just affordable housing. So getting out of this affordability factor, which is being layered into the commercial conversion into residential, just destroys the economic incentive. So I think we just need to say, look, we want all kinds of housing. We want to see as much affordable housing as we can, but let's let people step forward and reduce the regulation and minimize this affordability requirement because that just there's this impression that developers are just making bank building these housing projects when in reality they barely pencil as it is with construction costs of what they are. So we need to sort of minimize the requirements and allow this ADU to move forward, this affordability, and the purchasing of a ADU is an innovative concept. I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to work. And the 3 points that were the takeaway from the UCSB forecast was one, reduce regulations to lower building costs. So developers estimate it costs twice as much in California to build anywhere else in the nation. So we need to address that one. Two, facilitate building where land is more affordable, which is sort of the basis of this ADU. You're taking the exact same property and you're allowing more instead of vacant backyards. How can we make the best use of that? So, yeah, most of the state is unoccupied. 90% of the state of California is unoccupied, and 5% is really densified. So we need to be able to use the land that we have. And then lastly, lever leverage the efficiency of modern technology to reduce construction costs. They flew me up to Boise, Idaho, and I got a tour of Gerdon, the modular building homes that they basically can build a house within 2 or 3 days and put it on a trailer, and it's down here in Santa Barbara within a day. And so they could take it off and plug it in and put it down. So it's pretty amazing. The costs are maybe 20% less than conventional costs. There's not a huge savings there, but on the timing for the construction, it's about half. So that's really where you pick up that efficiency. So I think leveraging that kind of technology will allow us to build homes faster, quicker, more efficiently, and try to make up for this 3 million home deficit that we've got out there.
Well, I think we're going to start wrapping it up, and it'd be great to hear from each of you any sort of ideas you have about, given the current climate we have, any innovative ideas about how we can do things in a way that's going to really move us forward in terms of addressing the housing need in Santa Barbara area.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
All right. So I think what we've seen a lot of is this sort of top-down approach from the state, and I think people at the local level have been reactionary to that, and it's been a lot to try to keep up with. And I understand why the state is taking that approach, and sometimes it's kind of, in my mind, it's overshadowed a bit the role that local governments can play in encouraging housing at the local level. And I think there's an immense opportunity, especially on the Central Coast, to plan for and improve our processes in a way that streamlines the kind of housing development we want, and makes that more beneficial and attractive to a local developer to construct the things that we want in town, instead of having the state come in and someone come and leverage state law in a way that we don't necessarily like. So I think there's an opportunity for our local governments to get more engaged and come up with better plans and strategies. The one thing I think I was reflecting on a little bit coming into this when I knew we were going to be talking to some architects is, right, the state has been really ratcheting back the amount of discretion that local agencies have over multifamily housing projects. And here in Santa Barbara and all communities haven't really touched how much discretion or control is happening over single family home projects. So there's a chance here that under state law that a 10-unit project can go through and be approved by staff, and a single family home remodel where they want to add a bedroom for a growing family goes through months and months of hearings and expends a bunch of money and to do that, and gets a bunch of design review and review by architects that a 10-unit project on the street doesn't have any of. And I think there's an opportunity here for local governments to reduce that burden on people that are able to buy an aging housing stock or a smaller house and upgrade it to their needs.
Well, I want to make sure that people know that um, a perfect solution probably isn't out there, but we don't need that to make people's lives survivable, right? That incremental improvement saves families right here, right now. Prices that are stable for just a couple years or are 5% less or are 10% less would be a game changer for them. And so, like, my just thing is we shouldn't give up. I love the work that our communities, that you guys do and that our community is striving to do. But we shouldn't take, there's different solutions. It's going to take a mixture of solutions, and it's going to take some realization that even incremental progress will help a lot of people and a lot of local people.
Yeah. Michael.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would love to propose with EQ 25 is that we think, what can we do right now? And the city council, for example, with the mayor, who is very much pro housing, could do to create some sort of emergency ordinance. We kind of had an economic earthquake with retail. We've had some, environmental issues that have been sort of addressed. But maybe there's a sunset 3-year, 4-year ordinance that says, if you guys want to build housing, now's the time. We're going to give you this opportunity. And this is going to sunset, by the way, but would allow small property owners in the downtown core. We're not talking rural areas. We're talking downtown core, Santa Barbara, to work together, because these smaller properties are really hard to make sense of. But if they said, hey, we're actually going to allow you to increase your density if you guys work together, not require parking, and build projects that make economic sense, that's how we could kind of start to build the vision that's on the walls down there at the city planning department, and that we've all love. And there's models around the world about how beautiful it can be. It's 3 and 4 stories of housing above ground floor commercial. So they're 5-story buildings. We can barely make it fit within our 65-foot height limit. San Luis Obispo increased their height limit to 75 feet to allow for this kind of development. So I think we build housing where it makes sense in the downtown areas, and in the rural areas, we don't want to do that. So, I mean, we can do the ADUs. You don't even know that those units are back there. You're pretty much maintaining the existing quality of the environment. And so the solutions are pretty simple. We just need to get the policies that would allow those projects to move forward. And we're pretty optimistic about it. And the state is putting the pressure on the county and the cities to do this. So I feel like we can make a dent in this, in the demand that's out there.
Yeah, I love that sort of jump start, shake things up, kind of tie it back to that earthquake centennial that we're celebrating right now. Thank you for everyone for listening to the conversation today. As we said before, this will be the first of several conversations that happen around housing, and we really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.